Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Kenton Hornbeck of the BeckDeck podcast, joined alongside Logan Decker. We are in the shadow of the 2026 Super Bowl, which concluded last week. I'm listening to Bad Bunny right now. I just had to turn that down before we hopped on the podcast. Decker, what's your thought about the economic and political state of the world right now? No, I'm just kidding. First off, happy birthday.
Thank you, man.
Let's start there. Happy birthday. How old are you? What did you do for your birthday? Tell me a little bit about that before we jump into the main pod.
Yeah, so I am 29 years old. I'm hanging on my 20s for one more year, and then I become Unc. Not super excited about that, but hey, it's going to hit eventually. I had a pretty low-key birthday. Worked Friday, and that was my birthday was on Friday. So after work, wifey had made a reservation. We went out to dinner. Met up with some of her family. Relatively quiet, Valentine's Day. We did some brunch. Went to the golf range a little bit. Just trying out a couple new things I got for my birthday because everybody's just trying to load me up on golf stuff right now because I don't know what else to do when I'm 29 years old. But no, it was good. It was quiet. It was just how I wanted it, to be honest. I'm not a big here's a surprise party, 50 people and you only know half of them, or nothing like that. So it was a good weekend, good Valentine's Day. Had some pretty good weather down here past couple days. Of course, it's raining today as I say that, but it was a good weekend. How about you and your Valentine's Day?
Valentine's Day went really well. My girlfriend and I went to a Lego art exhibit yesterday in downtown Cincinnati, which was really neat. I can't remember the artist's name, but essentially he makes sculptures out of Legos. Some of them are based on, for example, he made Michelangelo's David out of Legos, and he has a lot of other pieces. I cannot remember his name. I think it was Michael something, but it was really good. We went and did that. Ate at Forno, which is like an Italian restaurant. After the art exhibit, then to round it out, we went to Carabello Coffee in Newport, and she prepaid for this cocktail/dessert experience. And what's funny about that is all of the cocktails were really good, the desserts were really good, but we both thought we were paying for alcoholic cocktails, and instead they were just mocktails. And they were all really good, but the menu, when she was first doing that online, the menu said drinks. And usually when I think drinks, I think alcoholic beverages, but I guess they were just drinks, like mocktails. So anyway, we didn't get messed up or anything yesterday on Valentine's Day. Had a pretty low-key day after that, but it was good. The weather up here has been nasty. The snow's been melting all week. The river's up kind of high, cloudy for the most part, and just ready to get into March and hopefully see some consistent sunshine, because up here in the Cincinnati area, the Midwest, it's been pretty gross.
Yeah, it's I hope we're starting to make a turn down here, because later on in the week we're in the 70s, which is fantastic. Love it. But nobody came in here to talk about the weather or hear about everybody's Valentine's Day. We want to dive right into the Super Bowl. You had mentioned that maybe in our conversations that maybe not the most exciting Super Bowl for you, but I'm one of those football sickos that was just eating it up the entire time, enjoying this heavy defensive performance, which when we gave our predictions, I kind of lowballed it. You went a little bit over the top with it. I think I said 16-13. You said something like 27-24, if I remember correctly, somewhere in that range.
I can't quite remember. If I had to guess, I think it was 21-17, but we both had Seattle winning in a slugfest of sorts.
Yeah, and I got the Patriots score right. I got half of it there. But the game, overall, I enjoyed it. We had both made the comment that this is going to be a defensive-heavy game. I had mentioned specifically that I think whichever defensive line takes control and is able to be more aggressive and get to the quarterback, I think that'll be the telltale sign. And we got to see almost a record for sacks in a Super Bowl from the Seahawks with 6 total. And I'm going to start on the Seattle side here. So it's not that New England wasn't getting pressure, but they were. Sam Darnold was just doing some of the best pocket navigation that I've seen in his entire career. You didn't watch him panic. He definitely had a couple throws that could have gone wrong, but it just didn't fall New England's way. But he navigated the pocket well. He got it out to his open wide receivers. And to be quite frank with you, like we said, the offense really wasn't there for about 3.5 quarters, 4 quarters. And I'd say the only man, I won't say only because I'm discrediting the offensive line, but Kenneth Walker, the running back for Seattle, winning the MVP, in my mind, was well-deserved. Because when you watch that game and both of these offenses were struggling, there was one guy that was consistently moving the marker for Seattle, and that was Kenneth Walker. He had 27 carries, 135 yards. He had a couple key receptions, 26 yards. And I think a lot of people, because Seattle's not a big, it's not a big market in terms of the NFL landscape. They've definitely had moments, but I think a lot of people on the national scale had maybe only seen Kenneth Walker play in, blips and pieces, and you got to see, you could clearly see in terms of that side of the ball, Seattle's offense, New England's defense, that the best offensive player that they had, at least for the Super Bowl, was Kenneth Walker. He just, his escapability, the way that he's able to break runs out to the outside, he just looked like he was in a different gear than a lot of the defenders and the players around him. JSN was kept relatively quiet, 4 catches, 27 yards, and that's where I want to give kudos to the best defensive player I think I saw in the entire game was Christian Gonzalez, who, phenomenal. Like, if it was not for the number of plays that he made for pass deflections, Seattle would have been in the upper 30s in terms of points. That he's one of those guys that, if I'm looking at players that really stood out in the moment, Christian Gonzalez was incredible. He showed me, I'm like, man, this guy's going to be around for a long time. He's going to be the top 5 cornerback conversation in the league for years to come, including now. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he wins a true award himself in the future. I think he will continue to develop as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he did get hurt at one point. Cooper Kupp, you got to see a little bit of a resurgence where it's just, 6 catches, 61 yards. He came in, he took the number 1 role when he had to, and he performed well. And then you got to see, in terms of, a guy that has kind of came out of the midst this year, and that's A.J. Barner, their tight end. 4 catches, 54 yards, 1 touchdown. He's going to be a really solid piece for them for years to come. He's not this explosive athletic guy, but he kind of reminds me of the type, Dalton Schultz type, guy from the Cowboys who is
Jake Ferguson.
Like, he's just, he's better than your average tight end. He's very solid. He's quick. He's got good hands. He always seems to find the open gaps, which is what you need in a tight end when you're having to escape out of the pocket, maneuver around like Sam Darnold was. And Darnold, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, 1938 completion. Was this a statistical phenomenal game for Darnold? No, but he did his job. I heard somebody say, the game manager label has become very negative, but in this type of sense, he did his job very, very well. He moved the ball when he had to. He didn't take bad sacks. He limited his bad throws. And any time that they had to, let's just say, punt the ball away, how many times? I think there's 3 of them. 3 punts landed within like the 5-yard line. So the special teams was just significant for Seattle when handing over the ball. And of course their kicker, Jason Myers, 5 for 5, which is pretty rare that we see, especially in the past couple of years. What do we always see from coaches? They go for it. They go for it. The analytics say go for it, get the points. And Seattle was just content. Take the 3. Take the 3. Take the 3. And you could feel every field goal that they took just kept adding the pressure onto New England, which is when you saw the mistakes start coming in later in the game, because at that point, not just the score, but the time is your enemy here. I don't want to jump over, so I wanted to keep it Seattle offense, New England defense. The 1 sack that New England had was Milton Williams, who's had a phenomenal year. He's a phenomenal defensive tackle. Like I said, they were getting pressure, and they, in terms of third down efficiency, Seahawks only converted 4 of their 16 third downs. So and the game itself, in terms of possession, Seahawks had 33 minutes, Patriots had 26. This wasn't maybe as dominant as we were watching on paper. It was just Seattle's offense was able to, when they could get enough to be in scoring distance, put up the points. And when they couldn't, they would put New England in a bad situation to be like, hey, if you want to score a touchdown, you got to drive 95 yards down the field. That's extremely tough to do, especially against the Seattle defense. So I want to let you jump in here and kind of breach in what you think or what you thought about Seattle's offense and New England's defense before we flip it to where we're talking about New England's offense and Seattle's defense.
I felt like the game plan from Mike Vrabel and the Patriots was to force Sam Darnold to mess up early, break Sam Darnold, have him cough up the ball, give New England the ball, then go out, try to score some early points, create some sort of lead, and then lead on the defense to stifle Seattle's offense going forward. Sam, to his credit, did not turn the ball over. He had a really, really, really solid game, which is all Seattle asked of him. And really, that's what Seattle's been asking of Sam Darnold all season. You mentioned the game manager label becoming somewhat negative. You hear guys like Cam Newton, who former NFL MVP in 2015. I saw a segment where he was being asked, is this quarterback a game manager or a game changer? Essentially, who he thinks there are the real good quarterbacks and who are just kind of meh or not real game changers. And he was going through the list, and I just felt like the conversation, while it may have been good for content, lacked some nuance. So many of these teams need good game managers because some guys just don't know how to manage the game. And what you saw with the Seattle Seahawks is that if you have a competent game manager, especially one who has some God-given talent like Sam Darnold, you could potentially win the Super Bowl if you have the right coaching staff, the right defensive players, and good enough special teams that could propel you to the Super Bowl, which is exactly what happened. Their thesis paid off. I think Seattle's offense really, they ended up, it was a bend but don't break for New England. And they just bent far enough to allow Seattle to get a wide enough margin to win the game. That's where I thought the Seahawks did well. That touchdown to A.J. Barner in, was it the early fourth quarter or the late third quarter? I can't remember. Second half touchdown, that really gave them some padding in that game because before that, although they were winning, I believe, 9-0 at halftime, you still felt like if New England can get the ball rolling a little bit on offense, if they're able to score a touchdown here, you got a one-score game, essentially. So I thought Seattle's game plan of run the ball, lean on Kenneth Walker, take what the defense gives you, and don't turn the ball over is a tried-and-true method to win games in the NFL, and especially against teams that are defensively stout, like the New England Patriots. I want to zoom in on what you were saying about Christian Gonzalez because he made two defensive plays in that game that I thought were incredible. I never really watched a lot of the Patriots this year. They were on TV, but I, kind of banned myself from watching them. I'll go back and look at the stats afterwards. But Drake May isn't the most aesthetically pleasing quarterback to watch all the time, and New England's kind of a grit and grind team. They run the ball a lot. They don't have a dynamic number one receiver. So I really was interested to see how Christian Gonzalez did in this game, leading up to it. That play he made in, I believe, the first quarter or second quarter on the pass to Rashid Shaheed, completely laying out, getting his hand on that ball, diving out like a center fielder in baseball and tipping it away. I was like, wow, what a play. First off, it's the Super Bowl. Guy came to play. That's the kind of plays you need to make in the Super Bowl. He also made a really big one in the second half. You could say that if New England didn't have Christian Gonzalez, they scored that, that ball falls right into Shaheed's hands. He's walking into the end zone. That's a touchdown for Seattle. Changes the dynamic of the first half completely. New England's defense was stout. They impressed me, but Seattle's was just a little bit better. I know we're going to talk about their defense here in a second, but New England, I think they just ran out of gas, unfortunately for them. the defense is what was keeping them in the game. When they weren't able to spook Sam Darnold early, they kind of just fell back into a maintenance, like we just don't let him score, let him take the field goal here. Seattle took the points that New England was giving them. Myers made all his field goals. Michael Dixon really punted the ball well. There's an argument that even though Myers kicked 5 field goals, he was the real special teams MVP. Seattle special teams, incredible performance. And to summarize kind of what I'm saying here is, in the NFL, to win games, you need to win in all 3 facets. And I'll add a 4th with coaching. You need to not turn the ball over on offense and just progressively move the ball down the field. No matter how you do it, you just got to keep moving forward. On defense, you can't give up big chunk plays that turn the momentum of the game and lose you good field position. You don't want to do that. And then the most underrated part of the game is special teams. You saw with the Los Angeles Rams, if you're not able to have good special team play, you're not going to win the game. The punt, return, fumble changed that entire NFC Championship game, let Seattle down toward the goal line, giving them an opportunity to score, great field position. You have to have all of those things buttoned away. And then 4th is having a coaching staff that is able to build a game plan that is dynamic, but that essentially is dynamic. You can alter the way the game goes by taking read of what the defense gives you or the offense gives you. It's just coaching, folks. And Seattle's coaching staff did really well. You see Clint Kubiak, their offensive coordinator, getting hired by the Las Vegas Raiders. Mike McDonald, at only 38 years old, is already about to have a coaching tree, or is already creating his own coaching tree. He's only coached as a head coach for 2 years. He won a Super Bowl. So shout out to my Sigma Phi Epsilon brother, Mike McDonald. Really cool to see that. And I really like the Seahawks this season. I think if I had to predict how they were going to do at the beginning of last year, I would have said they are a playoff team. Maybe not a division winner, but give me somewhere like a 10-7 or 11-6. That's kind of the range I felt like Seattle was going to finish in. If you would have asked me about Sam Darnold, I would have told you maybe a slight regression, but still pretty good. I like Sam Darnold. That's kind of what happened. I'm not going to give myself a pat on the back in hindsight. I think Sam has said, or let his play speak for himself. But that's kind of my 2 cents on Seattle's offense and New England's defense.
Yeah, I think you made some phenomenal points about the 4 facets of the game. The special teams definitely jumped out. I agree. I think the defense on both sides did a really great job. I just think the focus was, for New England, let's shut down Sam Darnold, and Kenneth Walker ran over them. For Seattle, their focus was, let's shut down the run and let's make Drake May beat us. That's what I saw out of it. And the coaching aspect that I want to touch on is that there were times where I questioned New England's play calling on offense, where the best runner on the field was Drake May. And a lot of those runs that he had were him just scrambling out of the pocket. I just didn't understand what you're watching. The Seahawks, they're doing a little bit of play action. They're getting Sam out of the pocket some, trying to get him to navigate into some open space. And I just did not see that a lot with Drake May. Is that you got a quarterback, like I said, 6 sacks. He's got a lot of pressure on him. You can tell that the intensity is kind of getting to him with maybe how more sporadic he's getting with his throws, his timing on things, where he'll make a throw, but it's a little bit behind or a little bit high. And I just thought that they needed to do a better job to get him out. Now, the final stats don't look that way. 27-43, 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. But a lot of those stats came in the fourth quarter, because at that point the dam had broken in terms of, hey, we're just, we're not doing the conservative play call anymore. We got to put up points. He didn't get a lot of help from his running game. Ramondre Stevenson, although he did have a couple of nice moments, he still only had 7 carries, 23 yards. Travion Henderson, preseason fantasy god that everybody was hoping. 6 carries, 19 yards. Their leading receiver is Mac Hollins, 4 catches for 78 yards, a touchdown. Stephon Diggs was basically blanketed with Witherspoon and some of their other guys. He only had 3 catches for 37 yards. The offense was uninspiring for the most part. You had mentioned earlier, the New England, it became very obvious through, at the start of the game that there was no one wide receiver out there that could just dominate the targets. Seattle, they have that with JSN, but Christian Gonzalez is covering him. Well, and then you got Cooper Kupp, you got A.J. Barner, you got all these other guys. You got Kenneth Walker. Take some of the pressure off of your release valve, your safety valve with JSN. New England doesn't have a guy like that. They just don't. And I think not only that is that I knew coming in that the left side of New England's offensive line was questionable. You got 2 rookies on the line, and it's the amount of memes that came out with their left tackle was hilarious in terms of the small arms. It's funny. It was mean, but I enjoyed it. But they were just getting dominated on that side of the ball. And this is where I had made comments in previous episodes where Seattle has just been building for years. Depth, getting guys in, bringing in DeMarcus Lawrence, bringing in guys just to stack this defensive line. So they just have this heavy rotation, and they're well experienced. They're veterans. They're staying fresh with their rotation. You're going against 2 rookies, where one of them we don't even know if he's healthy, perfectly healthy, to be quite honest, but they just got to put him out there because he's the best available. And they're just consistently getting beat and dominated on that left side, and Drake May is responding negatively to it. They were 6 of 15 on third down efficiency. I've already mentioned the possession time. The one thing about this Super Bowl I really enjoyed is that there were only 7 penalties called the entire game. They just let him play. And there's a few times, especially with Drake May, the last one where he got sacked, fumbled, where in that moment, like just watching it full speed in the moment, I thought Drake May died on the field for a second. Just the way that he comes up, he gets hit across his chest, and the guy takes out his leg. It looked way worse real time than it did on the review. But that just summarized the game for me, is that, hey, Seattle's defensive line was able to get the pressure. Drake May looked like he was seeing ghosts out there. And then Drake May, to be quite frank, he had one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen in a Super Bowl. It was one of those when he threw it over the middle. He's 5-10 yards short of his target. I was like, did he get hit? Did his foot get stopped? Did his throwing shoulder stop motion? And you looked at the replay, and I'm like, no, he just undershot it. I don't know if I don't want to say he was scared to go through the full motion and put the power into the ball, or if he thought he was going to get hit, or if he just, I don't know, panicked or just didn't have the gas in the shoulder. I don't know, because I've seen him make deeper throws. I've seen him be more accurate on those throws. And it was just one of those, I think to summarize the game, is you're watching a team that has been building for 3 to 4 years now. They make the Russell Wilson trade. They get rid of DK Metcalf, and they're kind of moving these pieces around. They're drafting really well. And you're watching New England, who is a phenomenal story, and they do have good players. But keep in mind, this is a team that was in the top 5 in draft picks last year, in the draft order. And they make all these free agent signings. They put it all together, and this is still a team that has many holes. You still have a lot of youth that's putting around the roster. So I say kudos for New England to making this far. I don't want to say you shouldn't have been here, but this was an improbable run, more than it was with the Seahawks. And New England was just this team that looked like they were still putting some pieces together. And Seattle looks like a team that, we mentioned this last week, they're not going away. I'm not saying New England's going away, but I think everybody's like, there's a possibility, is New England going to make the playoffs next year with their tough schedule now in their division? And, you're the Drake the Mace Drake the Schedule May nickname that has come out, which I love. I'm not even hating on it. I'm just like, that's brilliant. This is like one of the best digs I've seen on a football player in recent history. It was just, and then in terms of the tempo of the game, the fourth quarter, where coming at the end of the third, it was 12-0. Then Seattle, I believe that's when they scored their first touchdown, and it was 19-0. And then New England runs down the field. They score the touchdown real quick, and I'm like, okay, we have a game. It's a 2-score game. They make the stop against Seattle, and I'm like, all right, this is it. This is Drake May's moment. This is where I thought, I'm like, of course, this game's a snooze fest. And I kid you not, in my mind, I'm like, all right, the script writers are cooking. This is going to be the most chaotic, 9 minutes of the Super Bowl. We're about ready to see New England do this run. I honestly felt that. I'm like, they're going to come back. They're going to make it a game. And then that's when they had the turnover, and I'm like, yep, it's over. The momentum is dead. You could just feel. I felt it. It was just in the air. I'm like, it's done. You can see it on the TV with the players. But it was just, on the offensive side for Seattle, when they couldn't get anything going, Kenneth Walker was there. When it was with New England, they didn't have anybody there to get it started. And I think that summarizes a lot of their, let's just say, seasonal struggles, when they have had struggles, is that they potentially rely on that defense too much, which is, that's a good problem to have. But Drake May, I feel like for most situations throughout the season, was not forced in those scenarios where, all right, nothing else is working. It's all on you. And he just didn't have the experience to deal with that. And I think New England has a very good shot. They're going to be in the playoffs next year. I'll go ahead and say that. But I don't think with the AFC they're going to be in this reshuffle, this rebuild. There's no way in hell they make it to a back-to-back Super Bowl. No way. I'll let you in on this. What was your thoughts about watching New England's offense against Seattle's defense?
First, I thought it was funny that Mac, the psych ward Hollins, was New England's best receiver during that game. Obviously, Stephon Diggs didn't really touch the ball until the back part of that fourth quarter. He actually had a pretty funny moment where one of the first catches I even remember him getting in the game, they're kind of driving up the field to go score, and he pops up and spins the ball on the ground. It's like, dude, you need to hand the ball to the ref and line back up. And he's sitting here acting like it's a Week 9 game against the Jets in the Meadowlands.
That was a clown moment. That was one of those where
he's a clown.
Yeah. It was like, this is a Super Bowl, man. Like, you got to get the time. I didn't want to interrupt, but I agree. I was sitting there, I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? Get him off the team.
He's not a Super Bowl caliber player, in my opinion. Stephon Diggs is on the back portion of his career. At this point, most people know Stephon Diggs for dating Cardi B rather than what he's doing on the football field. The pink cocaine moment sticks out before the regular season to show me that he's not really focused on football the way he needs to be in order to really be a key contributor on a Super Bowl team. Although I guess if New England won that game, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about him this way. However, to go back to New England's offense, by the way, really, really, really quickly, did you see what Mac Hollins wore to the game? He wore that like jail jumpsuit.
Oh, yeah.
He had handcuffs and foot cuffs or ankle cuffs or whatever, and like flip-flops, and was walking into the game like he had just like murdered 10 people and was getting perp walked in. That was really strange. And then I'm sure you saw the like rat coat that he wore, where he skinned a bunch of rats, and there was like tails and little, paws stitched together like a mink coat, only was made of rats. Somebody, Cash Patel, if you're listening, put this guy on a list of some sort. I'm not saying he's a threat. I'm just saying jot his name down. Anyway, back to the analysis. New England's offense didn't really do much during this game. It didn't impress me very much because Seattle's defense was really overwhelming. You could genuinely make the case that Seattle, this year's version of the Seattle Seahawks defense, is one of the greatest defenses to ever win a Super Bowl. They have to be up there with the 2000 Ravens, the 2015 Broncos, certainly of the 21st century, just to name a few. I mean, these guys really propelled Seattle to the Super Bowl, and they deserve all of the credit. Witherspoon had an incredible game. Fun fact about Witherspoon, he actually went to the University of Illinois, which I always love pointing out because it's such a random college for such an elite corner to go to. But I digress. New England just didn't really have any answers for what Seattle was presenting them on defense. Drake May looked overwhelmed and frankly a little hesitant and apprehensive during that game. Where you could really see it was even though they were moving the ball more than they had all game in the fourth quarter, he seemed to be like that interception you brought up earlier, which was horrendous. He seemed to be kind of rushing it and just kind of, like throwing up a prayer, like, let's see where this goes, instead of, hey, let's like actually piece this up on offense, move the ball. Instead, he's kind of just chucking it downfield and seeing what happens because maybe he feels like he doesn't have enough, in the tank, or the wide receivers aren't doing it quite enough. I mean, when Matt Collins is the guy you're looking to in the fourth quarter, that tells you pretty much what you need to know about the state of the Patriots offense. So, yeah, Seattle's defense, incredible. I really don't need to beat that dead horse. I just think that in a couple years, we're going to look back on this season specifically and wonder a few things. One, all of the great quarterbacks in this league, Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, to a lesser extent, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, whoever, they missed an opportunity. They missed a golden opportunity this year. It will be a lost year for many of these quarterbacks. And Sam Darnold was the beneficiary of said lost year. I can't give him enough props for what he was able to do with Seattle this year. And, on the other part of that is their defense, which is going to be remembered as a historic defense. And it kind of reminds me of it kind of reminds me of a defense where there's not really one like key star on it. It's just a great, great unit. They do have really good players, but it's a great unit. It's not going to be remembered unless they just, go on some historic tear, which I don't think they will. I think they'll still be really good, but I don't think Seattle is primed to repeat next year. But the sum of the whole is greater than its parts, and that's what I really think is cool about this Seahawks team specifically, and what GM John Snyder did and head coach Mike McDonald did was incredible. I also want to point out that John Schneider, the defense or the GM of the Seahawks, needs to be people need to start putting him in conversations as one of the greatest GMs to ever, sit up in the box in the National Football League of all time. He won with Seattle in 2013, had Pete Carroll at head coach. They had Marshawn Lynch. They had the Legion of Boom and a young Russell Wilson. Won the Super Bowl in 2013, beat a historic Broncos team, go back to the Super Bowl the next year, 2014, and just miss out with the Russell Wilson pass to Ricardo Lockett that was picked off by Malcolm Butler. New England wins that game. They're still pretty good. Russell Wilson, he was kind of carrying them for a few years. They never were able to get back over the hump. So they tore it down. Complete rebuild. They got rid of Russell Wilson. They brought in new guys. They found Sam Darnold. They hired a new coach. And here they are, 2026. They lifted the Lombardi Trophy. John Schneider has built 2 different Super Bowl teams. I think that is willing of a Hall of Fame nod in general. Seattle is one of the best-run franchises in the NFL. All the props to them. And then bring it over to the Patriots. Going forward, I think New England is going to be good. I think there's going to be regression next year. The schedule is going to be a lot tougher. I'm going to need to see more out of Drake May in the playoffs. Obviously, the regular season he did really well. I want to see how it looks with a little bit elevated competition. One thing I think Drake May is going to be benefited by if New England is able to pull this off is getting a true number 1 wide receiver. Move off Diggs. You can have your complementary pieces, but New England needs a true number one. I don't know if they're finding that in the draft or free agency. That's who I'd be targeting if I'm the Patriots. I think they're going to continue to be good. I don't know if they're going to make it back to like an AFC championship game. I just don't feel like this unit, as this team as a whole, is kind of built for that. They kind of got some breaks in the playoffs, beating a C.J. Stroud-led Houston Texans team that turned the ball over a bunch of times. Bo Nix was out in the AFC championship game for Denver. That helped take the pressure off Drake May. It was also snowing during that game, so a little bit of weather ball played a factor. You know, and to bring it back to Seattle really quick to round out kind of my analysis, this team feels like the 2012 Ravens to me. And I don't mean that in a one-to-one comparison. I guess I just think that the Mike McDonald-led Seahawks are going to be kind of in the mix every year. They're going to be in the mix. Maybe some years they may miss the playoffs going 8-9 because they're in a tough division, or 7-10. But I think with him at the helm, they're always going to be pretty good. I think the real question for Seattle is, when do they start looking for a quarterback that's not Sam Darnold? Do you just keep rolling with Darnold every single year? When do you find a younger player to take up the quarterback position? The Ravens did that with Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco. Who's going to be that next guy for them? I don't want to look too far ahead, but I think that's a question that the Seahawks are going to have to address. Overall, boring Super Bowl, but if you really love football, it was a good game.
I hate you saying boring Super Bowl. I loved every minute of it. But I completely agree with your Schneider take. It is that is one that has not been talked about enough, just in the grandstand of the media, because that is Hall of Fame worthy. That does not happen often at all, where you get to see the same GM kind of build up two different regimes to take home the Lombardi Trophy, because most GMs are out by that time, or they're different, whatever it might be, just the circumstances. It just doesn't happen. And he has shown it is a very well-run organization. They're one of those that, and this may be a little bit controversial, but they're, they are what you would expect is like when you're talking about, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a blue blood of the NFL. I'm like, well, I'm sure the Pittsburgh Steelers wish they were ran like the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, the way the organization is what a blue blood franchise should have. But it's Seattle. So they're not on that public map often. And I agree with you in terms of this defense doesn't have standout star players. You had the Legion of Boom when they won their Super Bowl, and it was a phenomenon, and you had all these Seahawks fans coming out of the woods, out of nowhere. A lot of people, that's how they were introduced to Seattle. Maybe that's where their fandom started. And this team, it is a historical Super Bowl defense. And I saw, and I'm sure you saw it too on social media, we're like, whatever. People are saying they just didn't like that they were having the Seattle defense with the 2000 Ravens, with the 08-09 Steelers, they all of these really well-known teams, and I'm like, statistically they back it up. But I think part of it is, and this argument won't go away, is that the perception of, just because of how Seattle did so well against New England, in combination of how many people thought New England was not that. They're a good team, but they're not that good of a team to be in the Super Bowl. Like, how many people were like, including ourselves, were like, hey, the Rams and Seattle, the Seahawks, that's our Super Bowl. Like, this is going to be the game. And we were right. That was by far the most entertaining game in the championship, in the divisional round. It's just what it was. So I hate for that to like kind of stain their legacy. But I'm in agreement. I'm like, this is a fantastic defense. Overall, they're young. They have cap space. They're not going away. We talked about that last week. But I enjoyed the Super Bowl. I'm sad that football is gone, and then I will get way too overhyped when it comes to June and July, and August is around the corner. and we'll have a fun time when that comes around. But what now? The Super Bowl's done, and leading into the Super Bowl, that's when we, the public, find out about the NFL Honor Award winners. And there's always some controversy behind who won it, who shouldn't have won it, who's in consideration, and whatnot. And I figured we would just kind of go down the list and say, hey, if we think this is a controversy, we will say maybe who we should have taken or reasoning for it. So we'll start off at the top. I'll lead off and say, hey, the MVP was Matthew Stafford, who had 366 points, and Drake May was second with 361 points, and it wasn't close to anybody else after that. And going in, I think we would say we would agree that Matthew Stafford was our pick for the MVP coming in. I don't think I've actually heard you say that, but just I know how you think on that subject. And I was kind of looking at the stats, and Matt Stafford had 4,700 yards, 65% completion percentage, 46 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Drake May, a little under 4,400, 72% completion percentage, 31 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So you have this anomaly, this difference between touchdowns, definitely 15 touchdowns difference. And the MVP is also a what have you done for your team kind of situation. How good is your team record? That plays a factor in it. It should, but I think it takes too much weight. And you're going to, we're going to see a little bit with this as well, as that at least with the Hall of Fame, I think people are taking a closer look at how or who gets to vote on this decision. So I don't have an argument with it. For me, after looking at the stats and really doing a deep dive, I didn't understand how Matthew Stafford only won by 5 points. That's where I was kind of, dumbfounded with this result is, yes, Drake May had a good season, but Matthew Stafford was in a killer division. I can make an argument, a much tougher conference, top to bottom, with how the season played out and injuries and whatnot. And he has the statistical significance in almost every category. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Do you think it should have been a closer race, or are you also as baffled as I am in terms of a 5-point margin for the vote?
I am surprised it was only a 5-point margin. To me, Stafford was the clear-cut MVP. Drake May was a nice story. He had a good season. They went 14-3, but he was not the best quarterback in the league. I always thought Stafford was the best quarterback in the league this year. Really, when the Rams started to get rolling, you're like, all right, Stafford clearly is playing a level above the rest of the guys. And taking that in consideration to also Patrick Mahomes getting hurt and some of the other marquee players at that position in the NFL getting hurt, it's not inconceivable to me to think that Stafford, was the best quarterback in the league for like the majority of the season, especially when you consider that we weren't even sure he was going to start the season because of his back issues. What I think happened and why this vote was so close is that the Boston local media also bleeds into the national media. There's a lot of prominent pundits. My favorite, Bill Simmons, he doesn't vote on it, but this kind of narrative of the Boston guys driving the bus for their boy, Drake May, who did have a great season, but he did not have a better season than Matt Stafford. And to me, when you compare the two, it felt like people making the Drake May argument were having to contort a little more. They were having to make these more specific points, or what about this, or what about that? And to me, the conversation never really should have gotten to that level, because Matt Stafford had the best season of his career that wasn't like a 5,000-yard one. I mean, the Rams were really, really good. Seattle won the Super Bowl. To me, the Rams were the second best team this season. If you had after the season, rank all the teams, or after the Super Bowl, I'm putting the Rams at 2. Sorry, New England. If the Rams were in the Super Bowl against Seattle, again, even after losing to Seattle, I still think Los Angeles gives them a better game. So I think the narrative around Drake May's MVP case, while legitimate, got inflated due to the front running from a lot of Boston people who were really invested in making the Patriots happen again because they were so desperate to dunk all over other people, because Boston fans, by and large, like, they want that so bad, especially when it comes to the Patriots. That's where I think that came from. To me, Drake May, clearly second team All-Pro, second best regular season. And I'll add this to kind of close out my thought here. You saw in the playoffs the difference between the voting totals, in my opinion. Matt Stafford played very well in the playoffs. Sean McVay, the Rams, they were really, really good. They were technically sound. They did have some holes in terms of the special teams, but by and large, Matt Stafford was leading a great football team. The Patriots, on the other hand, kind of limped their way to the Super Bowl. Drake May showed obvious flaws in his game. He's only a second-year player. That's all going to be corrected if his trajectory is what we think it's going to be. But when you compare the two and how they played in the playoffs, even though it's a regular season award, I think the proof is kind of in the pudding.
Yeah, I we're on the same statement point here regarding the MVP. Now, I think the one award that you could argue about the most was the Offensive Player of the Year. And it came down, in my opinion, to 3 different players. Just in terms of the voting for it, I'll mention the 4th one, but I didn't want to dive into the stats on it, just because you'll see why in a second. So Jackson Smith and Jigba won with 272 votes. Christian McCaffrey was number 2 at 223. Puka Nacua was at 170 at 3rd, and Bijan Robinson was at 4th with 168 votes. I dove a little bit more to the stats just to be like, okay, let me really compare the top 3, see which one I think is more impressive. And this is opinion. So it's about over 100-point difference between JSN and Puka Nacua. Here's the stats side by side. JSN had 119 catches for 1,793 yards and 10 touchdowns. Puka Nacua had 129 catches for 1,716 yards and 10 touchdowns. Pretty damn similar. And that's a 100-point difference between the two. Okay? Don't necessarily agree with the difference of it. Christian McCaffrey, and this is the one that kind of, I'm surprised that I personally feel this way myself, because I had no problem with, JSN wins the award. Just me like, okay, cool, he deserves it. He had a phenomenal season. Christian McCaffrey had 102 catches, 924 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had over 1,200 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. So he was less than 80 yards away receiving from having 1,000 yards receiving and 1,200 yards rushing. And keep in mind, Christian McCaffrey he's on a team with San Francisco that is constantly riddled with injuries. George Kittle is hurt. Jawan Jennings is, their number 1 wide receiver for most of the year. Ricky Pearsall's in and out of the lineup. One of their wide receivers is out speeding past the stadium, because God knows what Brandon Ayuk is doing. Don't know. Don't want to know. Defense has completely fallen apart between free agency and injuries, and even Brock Purdy was down for a time. The one consistency that the 49ers had on their team was Christian McCaffrey, and which is odd to say because usually he's one of the first guys that are down, but he stayed healthy all year. He played. He did extremely well. He was the reason, a large part of it is why they made it into the playoffs in their division to have double-digit wins. So I don't want to try to take away from JSN, but the discrepancy between him and Puka in stats is wild to have over 100-point difference between the two. And for Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion, looking at he should have won. He honestly should have won with the stats right there and how much he did for his team with everything else going on around him. I'm not trying to discredit JSN. I think part of this is, and this is another reason you had mentioned the media with Drake May and the Boston influence. I think there's another influence of, just like the NBA has a problem with MVP votes, that sometimes these voters want to get new people in, so there's a higher preference. And JSN is a newer name, and Christian McCaffrey has already won multiple Offensive Player of the Years. But what CMC did in terms of, now, big surprise, he won Comeback Player of the Year, so he did win that award. Maybe that was part of it. They didn't want it. They're going to give that to CMC, and they didn't want to give him the Offensive Player of the Year as well. But Christian McCaffrey, what he's done from last season with his injuries, coming in, playing the full year, and I will admit, watching him, it looked like he had lost a step at time, but he was still productive as hell. You know, I could go on and on about this, but I just think Offensive Player of the Year should have been with Christian McCaffrey, just based on the stat line, the storyline, how he affected the team, his comparison with the two other guys. Hey, Puka gets hurt. The Rams' offense still hums. Devontae Adams is still there. Matthew Stafford's still making a way. They got their Blake Corum and Kyron Williams are still moving the ball. JSN, I mean, we talked about it in the Super Bowl. He got shut down, but hey, other guys stepped up. The running game, you know, they didn't even have Zach Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker popped off because of Charbonnet's injury. But the most important person on the team for the 49ers this season was hands down Christian McCaffrey. So that's my argument. I'm not saying that they necessarily got it wrong, because all three of these players rightfully deserve an award. But Christian McCaffrey, in my eyes, should have been number one.
First reaction is that I don't have an issue with JSN winning it. I'm not saying you did. That's not what you were arguing. I'm cool with it because I think JSN was the best receiver in the league this year. You could also make an argument that Puka is like underrated. I think he's better than what people actually think, and I think they think very highly of him. I think he's actually a level above that. He's very, very valuable to what the Rams do on offense. But to bring it back to Christian McCaffrey, man, he is incredible. He's such an incredible player. He's a Hall of Fame player, in my opinion. Him and Derrick Henry are the two best running backs of this era, bar none. And we're kind of on the back part of that, especially with Derrick, because he's been in the league. Well, actually, they've been in the league the same amount of time, I believe. Both of them are Hall of Fame players. And it was that way in the Heisman race in 2015, I believe. But Christian McCaffrey is truly this generation's Marshall Faulk. Receiving, rushing. To me, he got the MVP stolen from him 2 years ago. I think Lamar had a pretty weak sauce argument to be MVP that year, and they kind of just gave it to him. Although Lamar should have won it last year, so Lamar should have 2 MVPs. I want to make that very clear. And this is not taking anything away from Josh Allen. I just believe that Lamar Jackson was better than Josh Allen last year. And then the year Lamar won it, Christian McCaffrey was better than Lamar Jackson was overall on offense. But because Lamar won it that year, they didn't want to give him 3 MVPs. I think the voters didn't. They didn't want to overinflate it. So all of this could have been prevented by just giving Christian McCaffrey the MVP of the year. He deserved it. And all that being said, he had a better season this year than he did that year. That's kind of my roundabout point. To me, he kind of went under the radar this season, unless you had him on fantasy or you were tuned in to a lot of San Francisco games, because they were really banged up. If they don't have him, they are really, really, really scraping the bottom of the barrel. And I know it's kind of baked into the Christian McCaffrey pie that he plays every other year. It's kind of like the running back Joe Burrow. One year Joe Burrow throws 35 touchdowns and 4,000 plus yards, and then the next year he plays 6 games and gets hurt. Christian McCaffrey, same kind of deal. I think he's done enough to warrant being in the Hall of Fame at this point in time. And JSN, in comparison, I get why they did it. You want to reward the best offensive player on the best team. Seattle won the Super Bowl. Clearly, JSN was the biggest weapon on Seattle because New England tailored their Super Bowl game plan to preventing JSN from being really, really productive. But again, when it comes to this voting, I don't have a big problem with it. There was only 2 first-place votes that separated them, but I do understand your point. And if he wins that award this year, I think it's great. It's fine. It adds to his legacy. I think unfortunately, while it's not the job of the media to do this, they kind of do it inherently, is that JSN is on the rise while Christian McCaffrey is kind of on the back part of his career here. He's on the latter half of his prime. He may have one good season left. Not that he couldn't have more good seasons. That's kind of what I'm feeling out of him at this point. While JSN will establish himself as one of the best receivers in the league year in and year out because he's an everyman, kind of like Puka Nacua. He can run a lot of different types of routes. He's short-handed. He's tough-nosed. And the last thing I want to highlight about this voting, and also really quick, shout out to Bijan Robinson, who had another great year. He's a really underrated player, and I think people are just now coming around to how good he actually is because he didn't perform as well as people may have thought after he got drafted that high. And to me, he's just kind of flown under the radar because Atlanta hasn't been that good on how actually impactful he is to their offense and just as a running back as a whole. But all 3 of these guys, JSN, McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, 1, 2, 3 in Offensive Player of the Year voting, NFC West. NFC West. This division constantly, year in and year out, is the best division in football. In my opinion, it's not the NFC North. It's not the AFC West. This division constantly produces some of the best players and best games and most interesting storylines. And yes, Arizona is bad, but getting carried by San Francisco, LA, and Seattle, I think is very apt that this award reflects how actually good this division is, generally on offense and defense.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I realized it as I was discussing. I was like, oh, yeah, they're all from the same division. I mean, that does go to show you, hey, this was the best division in football. And I agree. It was definitely more entertaining than NFC North in particular. Just even though with Arizona being the anchor, I'm like, I'll take any one of those 3 teams, quite frankly, against any one of those NFC North teams. The rest of these, I wouldn't necessarily say. That was probably my biggest controversial one. And like I said, I have no problem with Jason doing it. I do think there's a narrative that they're trying to create behind it, but I'm one man. What can I do? I'll never get a vote. Offensive Rookie of the Year, and I might go through all of these categories at once unless you're really dying to stop at one. Ted McMillan won with 445 votes. Next one was Tyler Shuck, 168. Travion Henderson, 111.
Let me actually, I wanna do this really quick. There's a YouTuber, I can't remember his name. You may have seen him, but he kind of reacts to the draft and how guys finished the season. I've been watching these like grade outs of how these guys have performed. So he gives letter grades and puts them on a tier list of how dudes did this year. And he gave Ted McMillan, who won Offensive Rookie of the Year, I can't remember the YouTuber. He gave him a C. And I thought his reasoning was actually pretty square. I wouldn't have given him a C. With his reasoning, I may have elevated him to a B because to me it's a little nonsensical to give a guy a C grade when he won the Offensive Rookie of the Year, 10 touchdowns, 1,000-plus yards, clearly what is going to be a key for the Panthers. But I thought that was a little weird. And now seeing him win this award, I'm still not sure. I think he's good. I'm still not sure how actually good he is. And I think this was a down year for the offensive rookies overall.
No, I agree. That was just about the point I was going to say. This wasn't really an impressive year for guys coming out. Nobody really stayed hot all year. Ibiku, Egbuka, I almost pulled a Gronk. He came out on fire with Tampa, and then he just disappeared, vanished the last third of the season. And some other guys were. I think if Travion Henderson maybe got a full workload, from the start, or he's a little bit more in the offense to where he's like, you guys drafted him. Where is he? He's only touching special teams. And then I'd say even though the quarterback situation, I think the one that showed the most promise out of everybody, and I mentioned him on the list, was Tyler Shuck. It's like, all right, this guy can ball. This guy can play. Because for whatever reason, I've seen way too many Saints games towards the end of the season because they were playing some exciting football. They always popped up on Red Zone. I was like, all right, let's see what a Louisville alum is doing right now. But, yeah, Tat ran away with it. He had over 1,000 yards, 70 receptions, 7 touchdowns. Shuck, he didn't get to come in and play the full season, but 2,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I didn't realize Travion Henderson had 911 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. It's very impressive considering he was not a factor for a third of the season at all because of his own team. Just loved Ramondre Stevenson too much. But in terms of that YouTuber that you had mentioned, I'd have to listen to the reasoning, but I would not be upset with a C rating. I think that's a little too harsh. I would say maybe a B. There's no way in hell I would put him as an A. But I would also say, is anybody going to be an A when you have Bryce Young as your quarterback? And we know people that are Bryce Young defenders. I'm like, listen, just because he has one game or 2 games out of the season where he looks like he's competent, and then the next game he goes back to being complete questionable dog water, I don't know what to think of him, and that hurts Tet. Tet has definitely helped Bryce Young more than Bryce Young has helped Tet. I will say that. But he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. I have no complaints about that one. He's just the one that was more. He had the most time, most consistency out of everybody that was there on the list. You're right. It was a underwhelming class, and I'll be honest, even though he got hurt, I think the most disappointing player out of this draft class was the Jaguars pick with Travis Hunter. They just couldn't decide what to do with him. He looked like I'll be honest, on offense, he kind of looked like a poor man slot receiver that they tried to run. I'm trying to think of the one guy in particular. We talked about him a couple weeks ago with the Giants. Guys came from Kentucky. But it's just didn't look
Wandale.
Well. Yeah, Wandale. He just kind of reminded me of like a poor man's Wandale Robinson. I'm like, this is the guy you traded multiple first-round picks for? And then they make the trade to get the wide receiver from the Raiders. And it looks like, well, guys, he's going to be playing defense from now on because I don't know. I'm getting off topic here, but Ted deserved it. Comeback Player of the Year, I already mentioned CMC won it. I think that was deserved. The next closest in that category was Aiden Hutchinson, who had that terrible leg break last year. I think we all watched it. Probably don't ever want to see it again. But he bounced back. He had 14.5 sacks, 54 combined tackles. He had a really good year with Detroit, despite his injury and some of his offseason recovery. Now, I do want to give a shout-out to the Cleveland Browns here on getting the Defensive Rookie of the Year and Carson Schlesinger, who was 6th in the NFL and with 157 tackles, had 2.5 sacks, 2 interceptions. He did phenomenal. It was one of those guys I was sitting there doing the research. I'm like, let me pull up some highlights of him because God knows, no, I'm not watching the Browns. I'm sorry. I'll see him in clips or Red Zone, but I'm not about ready to watch Shedeur Sanders play 60 minutes of football. And then second place for them. So Schlesinger overwhelmed. He won 441 votes. And then the Seahawks rookie safety, Nick Amenori, 81 tackles, 11 pass deflections, 1 interception, 2.5 sacks, played in the Super Bowl. He had a really phenomenal season as well. I have no dispute when your top 6, top 10 in a category as a rookie, you're probably winning it. And then Coach of the Year, Mike Vrabel won it, 302 votes. Liam Cohen, second, 239. Mike McDonald, 191. Ben Johnson, 145. This is one of those where I think, what does Coach of the Year come down to? It's how well did this team do before, the season before? How well did they do this season? What was the shape of the franchise of it? And Mike Vrabel just kind of checked the box off for every single one of those. And I'm not saying that Liam Cohen didn't. I'm not saying that Ben Johnson didn't. But this is one of those, like, we could have thrown out all these names, but I think if we sat down in a room with 10 different guys, 10 different people that watch football, and we said, who do you think's going to win Coach of the Year 3 weeks ago, I think we all would have said, probably Mike Vrabel. So that's not surprising to me at all. Did you have any takes on the Rookies of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Coach of the Year?
Besides my offensive Rookie of the Year take, not really. I think everything kind of sifted out the way it should have. My only gripe would be that I understand Mike Vrabel winning Coach of the Year. I don't want to take that away from him necessarily. I thought it would be. I thought it'd be. I don't know. To me, Mike McDonald, in hindsight, should have probably got the award, but I'm not going to gripe. It's not a hindsight award. I get the Patriots turnaround. They did, similar to Drake May, they played a weak schedule, and I'm also personally a little more impressed about what Liam Cohen did with Jacksonville as opposed to what Mike Vrabel did with New England. But that's just my 2 cents.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I think Liam Cohen is the coach that for Jacksonville that made me actually somewhat believe in Trevor Lawrence for once. Where I was like, all right, he's figured it out. And I was sitting there. We talked about it a few weeks ago in the playoffs where I was like, all right, this is Trevor Lawrence's moment. He's going to drive it down the field. And that's when he throws an interception on the first play. But Liam, this is a fantastic bundle of coaches to be voting for. You know, Liam Cohen, you could have had every argument to make, especially with how their defense played and just the offensive productivity that they've had despite past seasons, and how disappointing, I'm just saying, Trevor Lawrence and some of the other offensive components are. Obviously, Ben Johnson is one of those guys that was going to be in the category of it with how well Chicago played in the regular season, how efficient that I don't even want to say efficient, just the miracles that he would pull out of his ass with that offense. Because I wouldn't even say it was an efficient offense. It was just like, hey, guy knows how to put his quarterback to put him in successful moments. And he obviously, even though we know him as the offensive play caller and he's offensive oriented, he's definitely playing a role in the defense. He's putting the guys in positions to be successful. And then Mike McDonald, I think, obviously, you know, name should have been in contention there. I think a lot of this is also Coach of the Year is, I don't want to call it a popularity contest as well, but Mike Vrabel just had the better story coming in, I think, than all of these guys. You know, just replacing a head coach with Mayo, and then you're watching the ascension of Drake May, and you're watching him in one offseason retool this defense. It's, despite the schedule, you know, it doesn't surprise me. I don't have an argument with it, but I also could have seen any one of these guys win this award, and I wouldn't be upset either.
So with that being said, let's segue into our next segment here because you texted me about this the other day. I thought it was pretty interesting. A lot of other podcasts do this, but it's a fun exercise to talk about some underappreciated storylines in the NFL over the past season and just kind of pick our own brains on some of these players and coaches and situations. So we did our own superlatives. You remember in high school when most popular, Most athletic kind of thing. Well, we did a little bit of that kind of fun NFL version of it. So I'm going to tee it up to you, Logan. I have 3. You have a few more than I do, but let's tee it up to you. What is your first Logan Decker NFL superlative of 2026?
My first superlative is Unk still got it. And this is a nomination for a player who is past their prime but still producing at a elite level in one facet of the game or multiple facets of the game. I've got 2 on the list, but I know who I'm going to give this award to. So the first nominee that I have is Derrick Henry. He's the 5th oldest active running back in the league at 31 years old. This season, he finished 2nd in total rushing yards, just shy of 1,600. He was 4th in carries, 307 carries. He was 2nd in touchdowns, 16. And here's the impressive part. He had 17 20-plus yard runs, which is 1st in the league. And he had 4 40-plus yard runs, which is tied for 2nd in the league. Okay. My other nomination is Davante Adams. He's the 4th oldest active wide receiver in the league at 33 years old. You know, you're also thinking of Keenan Allen and other guys than that. But this is Davante Adams had the most productivity. We had made fun of him in previous pod episodes because he is the fade merchant. He's a goal line merchant, and he is. But he does it really well because he was 1st in the entire NFL in reception touchdowns, leading with 14. He only had about middle pack 700 yards receiving, but that was his role. Puka was basically the yak guy, and Davante Adams is he's the catching specialist in the end zone, the red zone guy. But I'll be honest with you, I still think if you put Davante Adams maybe in a different role, he'd still be breaching 1,000 yards. He would still probably get, 100-plus targets, 80-plus catches, that kind of situation. But I obviously got to give it to Derrick Henry because even though I think we've all had it this season where at times we're like, why isn't Derrick Henry getting the ball? Despite his age and definitely maybe he looks like I felt like, I don't want to say he's slowed down a step, but it's obviously he's not the same as what he was 5 years ago. But this man is still getting the 4th most carries in the league, and we're still demanding, where is Derrick Henry? Give him the ball. We're still yelling at it as fans. And this is the guy, I just want to see how long the ride goes because, hey, he's 31. He's still doing all these amazing stuff statistically. Baltimore still doesn't have another guy, I'd say, to really help him out on the committee there. They'll have a couple guys go in and out, but Derrick Henry is the man. I'm really excited to see where his career finishes because, as a Titans fan, I know more about Derrick Henry's background than probably the average fan does. And just, this man is one of those like workout psychopaths where, it's like, here's LeBron James in the cryo chamber, and he's got his personal nutritionist and this and that. Like, that's Derrick Henry at the running back position. So I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be this generation's Frank Gore, but there's a chance. So that is my superlative. I don't know if you got any comment on that or if there's an unk that I might have missed that you want to nominate. I didn't want to put a quarterback in there. I thought about Matthew Stafford, but I'm like, he's 37. He's old, but he's not Phillip Rivers old or Aaron Rodgers old for that point. But yeah, if you got another name, throw it in there. And if not, let's hear your superlative.
All I'd say is that if I had to pick one, Davante Adams probably would have been mine just because I had a lot of exposure to him on one of my fantasy teams this year. He had a really great season. He was a fade merchant, but hey, when you're a fringe Hall of Famer, that's the kind of production you put up late in your career. You find a way to be good and productive and contribute to your team when you're not in your prime. That's what those kind of players do. So my first superlative is the quote-unquote in theory award. In theory, this guy should be at or near the top of the league in terms of winning and in terms of overall team success and individual statistics and accolades. And because when you watch him play, everything seems to all mesh together. But when the yeast has settled, nothing really was accomplished, and it looks like a bunch of empty stats. And that award goes to our boy, the King Prince himself, Justin Herbert, who, yes, he is dating Madison Beer, and that was probably the most significant thing he did this football season, even above making the Pro Bowl, which I actually think you and I also got named to the Pro Bowl this year because we had better passing stats than Shedeur Sanders did. But Justin Herbert, at some point, is going to have to win something to me. And I don't mean a Super Bowl. I mean his division. I mean make it out of the wild card round. He has 2 AP MVP top 10 finishes, and I can't remember a single moment from either of them, genuinely. What did the Chargers do when Brandon Staley wasn't working out? He was their head coach, right, Brandon Staley? It was Brandon Staley, and then previous to him, it was Anthony Lynn, I believe. I think both of those guys are defensive coaches, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so they move off them and hire Jim Harbaugh, who is a great quarterback in his own right when he played, or was a great quarterback in his own right, and is considered widely to be one of the best football coaches living, either for pro or college, fresh off a championship at Michigan in 2023. The Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh largely in part because of everything I said earlier, but also the Chargers need to get more out of Justin Herbert. It's very clear to me that they hit on this draft pick when they took him after Joe Burrow in 2020. It's very clear that they hit. They have a stable quarterback. Quarterback is not the position the Chargers need to address. But it begs the question, because all of the analytics guys, all of the guys who talk about football for a living have an infatuation with Justin Herbert. And the narrative around him is more that the people that glaze him day and night need to reconcile with the fact that he hasn't really accomplished anything and that football is a team game. A couple Pro Bowls, cool. That's great. Joe Burrow made it to a Super Bowl already, all right? I mean, Tua Tagovailoa, who was in the same class, has made a few Pro Bowls. There needs to be a serious narrative conversation shift about Justin Herbert next year. Not that he needs to be traded from the Chargers, or not that the Chargers aren't doing enough to build around him. I think the Chargers are doing pretty solid. They drafted offensive line heavy last year. It's just that Justin needs to take the next step. He needs to grit down. He needs to win some of these close games. Trevor Lawrence won his first playoff game because Justin Herbert collapsed. What was that, 2023, 2022, a couple years ago? I wouldn't say Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than Justin Herbert. I think there's an argument here to be made, though, especially after this season. But Justin simply has not got it done. Before the year started, I was in my car listening to Nick Wright talk to Danny Parkins, who I really, really like. I don't know if you've ever heard anything Danny Parkins has had to say on Fox, but he's one of the best sports talking heads in the media right now, in my opinion. He needs his own show. But he's on Fox. He's talking to Nick Wright, who I don't all the time agree with. And before the season, I found myself agreeing with Danny Parkins that Justin Herbert is a great quarterback. And yes, the analytics do back that up. And the people that are saying he hasn't won anything and are being too harsh are over-exaggerating and maybe being overly critical. And I felt myself agreeing with Danny at that point in time. Nick contrasted himself from that take, saying he is on the opposite spectrum. Now, Nick is a Chiefs fan, so the Chargers and the Chiefs are in the same division. Obviously, he's going to hate on Herbert and the Chargers just a little bit because of the fan dynamic. But I do think Nick gave a good faith argument to this simply by saying if he was that good, they'd win more, do more in the playoffs. He's going to need to see something there. That was kind of the nexus of his take. And I was like, I don't agree with Nick here. I kind of understand what he's saying, but I'm not really in agreement with that. After this season, I'm totally with Nick Wright and these people, and I'm not going to be harsh, and I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, and I'm not saying any of that, obviously. I do think Justin Herbert is really good, but at a certain point in time, you got to win. And I think the people in the media, like, what's his name at The Ringer, who does the Stephen Ruiz, does the quarterback rankings, you can't consistently put Justin Herbert as a top 5 quarterback, and he is 6 years into his career, going on to his seventh year, and has never won a divisional title, never played in an AFC championship game. You can't do it. Drake May just played in the Super Bowl. Drake May is in his second year. I brought up Joe Burrow earlier. The Bengals had not won a division title since 2015 before Joe Burrow, coming off a leg injury, took them to the Super Bowl in 2021. They did lose. They were on the verge of winning, but he took them to a Super Bowl. Other players, Sam Darnold, signed by the Seattle Seahawks, takes the Seahawks to the Super Bowl. And to close out my point, the reason we need a narrative shift so badly is because I do buy a lot of the analytics. That's not the only way I think people should look at the game through. That's not the only lens they should look at the game through, but it does provide valuable information. It's like baseball has become overly analytical, and it hurts the conversation around the game because it prevents casual fans from really feeling connected to the game. And while football doesn't really suffer from that, there is a segment of analysts and fans who take that as gospel. And when I watch, but in fairness to Justin Herbert, when I watch him, the eye test tells me he is good. And then I look at the analytics, and they tell me he is good. This past season, 26 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 3,700 yards, 66% completion rating, 11-5. Last year, or 2024, 11-6. All of these are good. All of these are good things. When your eyes are telling you one thing and the numbers are telling you one thing, and then the results don't match up with that, that's where we're at. And that's the issue I have. So I don't want to hear the glaze unless there's just going to be this continual bandwagon every year talking about Justin Herbert. You're only hurting Justin Herbert's narrative at this point when you keep rolling this out here like, yes, he hasn't won anything, but he's still one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. And to me, the 5 best quarterbacks in the league have all won more than he has, and quarterbacks that I would not consider top 10 in the league have also won more than he has. So in theory, he's good, but in theory, the narrative around him also should improve.
You went in on Justin Herbert. Damn. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce this superlative just because it is a combination of what you had mentioned. I call it the no blame game quarterback edition. Justin Herbert is on this piece. You have covered it very well. I will just add one flavor onto it. And I'm sure you read this report that apparently when they had lost to New England this year, and it was a bad loss. Like, just the Chargers looked awful. Justin Herbert just looked lost. And part of the conversation was, Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator, longtime offensive coordinator with the Ravens, who was with the Chargers, was fired. They're basically saying, like, the offense just did not know how to react to some of these defensive movements and these stunts and some of these coverages. And part of me, and you had said, oh, Justin Herbert has been in the league for 6 years. Part of me was like, okay, that is definitely an offensive coordinator problem. But the fact that your 6-year quarterback cannot diagnose some of these problems and cannot make changes at the line, like we had talked about in the last episode with terms of quarterback development. Does Justin Herbert have a development problem, but just he's been shielded by this organization making consistent failures. And then this year, here's what's going to happen. It already is they're like, well, his Darisaw was out and Joe Alt was out. His offensive line was hurt and da-da-da. And I'm like, the no blame game is a guy that no matter what the result is, he is not the one taking the flack for it. It's heating up, but he's still not the number one target for it. Chargers fans are like, Justin Herbert's our hero no matter what. And I'm like, maybe Justin Herbert is more flawed than you think, but it's just that the trash pile around him has been higher. And I'm not trying to call Justin Herbert trash. I'm just saying all these points that you've made, I've agreed with because he has nothing to show for it. And it's funny, you had mentioned like all these other teams that have won their division and made it past them. Guess what? Bo Nix has only been in the league for a couple years, and he's already done it. He's already passed him up. I could sit here and say I think Justin Herbert is a more talented passer, but guess what? At the end of the day, when we're talking about winning in this situation, you've been outclassed by a guy who might be the same age as you, but he's been in the league for less than half the time. So the other quarterback I want to put in this category, and maybe this is a little bit more controversial, but I do think that it will start to heat up over the next couple years because this is a franchise. I feel like it's good, but it's a boat with no paddles sometimes, and that's Jordan Love. And Jordan Love, yes, he has won a playoff game. Congratulations, you beat the Cowboys. Awesome. Love it. But in terms of, hey, this past year, they lost to the Bears. The year before that, they lost to the Eagles. They lost to the 49ers after beating the Cowboys. And the thing is, Jordan Love is not at the heart of the conversation of why they are doing bad. It's always like, oh, the defense just didn't have enough help. Or, the receivers, the receiver help he's getting. It's like, yes, I agree with some of these. But how many times, how do you lose to Chicago when he starts out and he fires 4 touchdowns? He's on fire, and then all of a sudden the game just goes completely cold. And, Chicago we talked about, it's like they are a really good turnover unit, but they don't do a tremendous job at getting pressure, getting sacks. They let up a lot of yards, and that's pretty evident with how their playoff game went. But Jordan Love, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like if I'm watching him play and I need him to perform the big moment, it's not going to happen. And this is more, I'm not diving into the statistics behind it, but Jordan Love, I feel like, because Green Bay is just such a conservative franchise, like Pittsburgh, to where it will drive you insane, is that they're like, all right, we drafted Jordan Love, they're letting him sit, we're letting the plan in. It's like, they're the franchise that makes a 10, 20-year plan, and when something goes wrong, they do nothing to adjust it. And they just let it sit and simmer. And I don't think Jordan Love's necessarily a bad quarterback, but I'm like, hey, man, like, the teams that you've been on has had talent at every single level at some point. They bring in Josh Jacobs. They draft Golden, and we can say that's not on a Jordan Love fault. That's a part of the organization. We'll see. I'm not out on Matthew Golden. But Jordan Love, I think he's running out of excuses at this point. And we haven't really heard about it this season, but I'm like, hey, give it a year. Give it a year or two. And when Green Bay is still sitting here trying to make it in the playoffs every year, when they lose in the first round, or they just beat up on some schmuck team that you knew they're going to beat up and then lose to a serious contender, they were already talking about firing their head coach this past year with LaFleur. And they gave him an extension. So once again, I'm like, hey, here is a franchise that is, in order to get them to change, it has to be something monumental, because they're not going to do it. Fans want their head coach gone. He gets an extension. Jordan Love, it just hasn't gotten to the point where it's starting to heat up like Justin Herbert, but I guarantee you it will heat up like Justin Herbert. It feels like the same kind of career path here, where it's like, yeah, he's got some good statistical games, and there's other games it's like Jordan Love doesn't look any better than Jacoby Brissett does. So my nominee for the no blame game is Justin Herbert, but Jordan Love is in the same category. I'm just going to sit here and say, hey, hot take, he's going to be in the same boat no more than 2 years from now. We're going to be having this same conversation about Jordan Love. What's your thoughts on that?
Not to just make this a big agreement fest, but I do think you're largely correct about Jordan Love. And also, I don't want to glaze this guy if he's listening because, I don't need to inflate his ego anymore. But my brother once told me, and he is a Vikings fan, but he once told me, this is like 2 years ago. And he's like, Ken, Jordan Love's he's only had like 7 good games in his career, bro. Okay? People like to sit here and talk about Jordan Love, and he's only literally had like 7 good games. He's like, go back and look through all the stuff on Pro Football Reference, and you're going to see that I'm right. And then I kind of did. It was a little bit of an exaggeration, like 7. I don't know what the exact number is, because he's had a lot of 2 touchdown, no pick games, 1 touchdown, no pick. I mean, I'm not sitting here watching every Green Bay game, but I largely came away from that mini research session being like, huh. And I don't think this is as dire of a conversation as the Justin Herbert one. They are kind of in the same boat. I do think there's a lot of Green Bay people in the media that really, really, really don't want to confront the potential mediocrity of Jordan Love because they're so invested in the Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love quarterback tree thing that we love to reference all the time when we talk about Green Bay. But again, I don't think it's as dire yet, but I will say this about Jordan Love. He hasn't won 10 games yet. Green Bay is usually one of the best teams in the NFC, and I don't see them really sniffing any sort of significant playoff success. And after you're a starter for 4 or 5 years, that largely falls at the feet of the people or the person leading your offense on the field. So I just want to say that. And yes, Mike LaFleur does have Matt LaFleur does have a large part to play in that. But when it comes to comparing the two, I'd elevate Justin Herbert more because I think everything you just said about Jordan Love is true and then some for Justin Herbert. Not to make this a 1v1. I do kind of agree. I'm willing to give Jordan Love a little more leniency than Justin Herbert because he has won a playoff game. Yes, it was against the Dallas Cowboys, so, whatever. But, if this goes on for another 2 years, then he will be in the Justin Herbert category. Now he's in the Justin Herbert. He's like the Diet Coke of Justin Herberts. People are just now starting to realize this, but maybe they'll come to it quicker because you can't keep giving up. You can't have Caleb Williams come in and immediately be better than you. That's really going to be something on Packers fans' minds throughout the offseason. And yes, I know Caleb Williams was the number 1 overall pick, but it does seem like the Bears have largely figured it out, and Ben Johnson is a coaching guru, and he's better than Matt LaFleur. So if you're comparing the two, the Bears have a better situation than the Packers do at the moment with Micah Parsons being on Green Bay, all of that. Like, I still think the Bears are better. And if Jordan Love was really that great, I wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, it's we are having an agreement fest today, and that's okay. But it's we have the same mindset on it. I've said my piece about Jordan Love. That is controversial. I know a couple Packers fans. I've said this out loud to them, and they don't like it. But deep down, I think they know I'm right. Because let me say this. It's like, okay. The amount of promise that, let's say, Brett Favre has shown with your team within this time frame, or Aaron Rodgers that has shown with your team this time frame, and compared to Jordan Love, you're not feeling good. You're really not. And then if you want to tell me, like, hey, what do you think about Jordan Love in the future teaching your next quarterback? I think that feels even more unstable. You're like, I don't know. I'm not going to dive any further more into this topic. On I'll go ahead. I'll make this one a short one. So my superlative is...
Wait, really quick, Logan. I'm going to add this for you. All right, you mentioned the Packers fans. This is just a really quick point because I know that feeling in their stomach. They're rejecting what you're telling them because they deep down know this to be true. And I'm not saying this is a one-to-one comparison, but I think the feeling is mutual. I'm a Kentucky basketball fan. The last time Kentucky basketball won a national championship was 2012. Currently, it is 2026, and we're not any closer to winning March Madness at this point in time. The last time the Green Bay Packers won the Super Bowl was 2010, I believe. That is now 16 years ago. Okay, UK fans are more raucous. They're more they're crazy about it. They're going to confront you on social media. I think Packers fans are more classy and put together. So I'm not making that comparison. But what I will say is what the two fan bases share is that pit, that feeling in the pit of their stomach. Like every year they go out there and they say, "Hey, we are one of the best franchises in NFL history," or "We are one of the best programs in college basketball." And yet, every postseason, you leave it feeling, we came up short again. And no matter how good you are, and no matter how good the team is, or how talented they are, that pit grows year after year after year. And I can't help but feeling like the Packers and Kentucky basketball are similar in that way. That's just an observation I'm making, but it's been a long time since they really won, and I don't think Jordan Love is capable of winning them a Super Bowl, just like many UK fans think that Mark Pope may not be capable of taking them back to the promised land.
The Green Bay Packers are about 10 years away from this continued trajectory to being today's Cowboys. Just think about that in terms of the longevity of it. I just like throwing that out there because fuck the Cowboys. Anyway, my quick superlative is the best quarterback who can never win. And this season it was Jacoby Brissett, who came out and actually looked like he was actually balling. Best season he's had statistically, over 3,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He went 1-11 during this time span, covering up for Kyler Murray and his injury. But I can honestly say, watching a lot of those Cardinals games, which I saw way too many Cardinals games, their defense is just horrid, and it was just Jacoby Brissett just trying to make some offense happen. And, between, Harrison Jr. when he was healthy and, out of the woodworks, I'm forgetting his name, the other wide receiver. Malcolm Floyd's an old one. That's not Malcolm Floyd. That's way back. Michael Wilson. Phenomenal. And then, the fact that they really didn't have a running back all year because they just kept getting hurt. Connor going down, their backup going down. And it was just basically the offense was like, screw it, Jacoby, just go do what you want. And he did ball out, Do I think this is like a career resurgence? No. But I just wanted to give Jacoby Brissett kudos for being a statistical champion on one of the worst teams in the NFL. So that's a quick one for me. Do you have... I'll go ahead and let you throw your next superlative out there, unless you want to really talk about Jacoby Brissett.
Not going to in on Jacoby Brissett, but what I will say is, do you know the sicko meme? Like the guy in the window, like, yes. There definitely was someone out there in a fantasy league who started Jacoby Brissett in the championship of their fantasy league and potentially won because of the late season push that he had at the quarterback position that nobody was paying attention to unless you are, a complete sicko.
So I'm in a 2-quarterback league, a Superflex league, and I came in with Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts, and I did get to that point where I was starting Jacoby Brissett because I could no longer trust either one of those guys, and I'm like, oh, we're cooked. And I got third place somehow. Didn't deserve that at all. But, yeah, I am the sicko. When I say I'm a sicko for football, that's the exact meme I'm talking about. I love it. One of my favorite football memes. And it's always like the analytics part of football Twitter. I love it.
So my next superlative, I'm not calling these people sickos because I would never do that. Kenton doesn't think that. I'm just saying. But some people may feel like they could cross a line. What fan base, everybody think about it out there, what fan base consistently toes the line and even crosses it sometimes? If you pick the Philadelphia Eagles showing up to Kevin Patullo's house, their fans, and even, maybe even like doxing him like low key, well, then you would be on the money. So my superlative is the quote-unquote most hated assistant coach award. And what really made me think, by the way, it's Kevin Patullo, fired offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. So what really made me think of this is I have a lot of Eagles fans in my life. My girlfriend is a big Eagles fan. Her dad is a big Eagles fan. The bar I go to weekly, the bartender there is a big Eagles fan. I actually, I like to make comments and jest about Eagles fans, but I really don't hate the Eagles or anything like that. And I'm not saying that just to cover my ass. Like I genuinely they've been good the past couple of years. It's been fun. Yeah, their fans can push it a little bit and be a little annoying, but at the end of the day, I don't really have any ill will towards the Eagles fans at all. But what I will say is the only fan base that, in my opinion, is capable of doing something like this is definitely the Philadelphia Eagles, who are reminiscent of sometimes a hooligan-esque English Premier League soccer club. So Kevin Patullo really was the face of the regression of the Philadelphia Eagles offense throughout this year. He was their offensive coordinator. He ended up getting fired at the end of the year. He was good friends with head coach Nick Sirianni, who many fans think is largely overrated, and I would tend to agree with them. I am a Colts fan. Nick came from the Colts before he went to the Eagles. He was fine, but I think he was a little overrated. Kevin Patullo in charge of the Philadelphia Eagles offense. Eagles this year finished 19th in points scored and total yards. That's well off expectations of what the defending Super Bowl champions were projected to do after last season, especially when we watched the Eagles really play well in that Super Bowl against the Chiefs. I thought their offense looked pretty good. Jalen Hurts was making some downfield throws. Also this year, passing yardage ranked 23rd in the league, and their rushing yardage was 18th. They have Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, who, yes, butted heads with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni a little bit, and I'm sure he also butted heads with Kevin Patullo. But you can't blame their offense regressing strictly on A.J. Brown being a diva. They had low offensive efficiency metrics. Philadelphia logged the lowest EPA during Sirianni's tenure, despite being one of the highest-paid offenses in the league, the most expensive offenses in the league. And this conversation also impacts the way people feel about Jalen Hurts, which was tenuous to begin with. Jalen Hurts is a very polarizing player. I think he's pretty good. Maybe he gets hated on a little too much. He's kind of like having a fullback who could throw the ball because he's able to, punch virtually punch in first downs and touchdowns. He's like a goal line back. I think it's really important that people understand that Jalen Hurts does have that part of his game, but he also limits potentially what they're able to do on offense. And when you don't set him up with good coaches, then they're largely going to struggle, and that blowback's going to fall back on Jalen Hurts. Because we saw after Kellen Moore, who was the Eagles offensive coordinator during the Super Bowl season, after he left to go to New Orleans and help Tyler Shuck become a pretty solid quarterback during the latter part of last year, Jalen Hurts was kind of regressing, and he didn't have that play caller to help him continue, improving in that aspect. So really, all of these offensive stats, I could sit here for another 10 minutes and rattle off how their offense wasn't very efficient or below average. This manifested in Eagles fans, anecdotally, from my experience and people I talked to in my life, getting really upset with who? Kevin Patullo. He was the face of their dysfunction. I can't tell you how many times at the bar, week in, week out, Kevin Patullo's got to go. Kevin Patullo is holding us back on offense. Kevin Patullo is the reason that Barkley's not playing well enough. Kevin Patullo is the reason that Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown aren't on the same page. He's not able to mend that relationship. At the end of the year, this is what I will finish the segment with, this particular point. So, Eagles offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo, this is NFL.com, December 3rd, 2025. Eagles OC Kevin Patullo says, quote, a line was crossed after his home was vandalized after the Eagles lost. He said, quote, unfortunately, it happened. I've been here 5 years now, and it's been awesome. This is such a unique place to play or coach and play. It's very special. We've been to 2 NFC championship games. We've won at Lincoln Financial Field, a Super Bowl, the parade, yada, yada, yada. As coaches and players, we all know it's part of our job to handle criticism. And while it's acceptable to sit up here and talk about what's going on, how to fix it, what we're going to do going forward, and we know that, but when it involves your family, it crosses the line. They egged his house. Of course they egged his house, by the way. This is the egging a house Eagles fans to a T. Like, come on, man. The Morristown, I guess the neighborhood in Philadelphia that he lived in, they reported, the Morristown police said his house got egged. The incident occurred after a loss to the Bears. They lost 2 in a row. He was in his first year as offensive coordinator. Didn't do very well. They fired him after the season. Kevin Patullo, I pour one out for you, buddy. You know, it's not all your fault that the fans feel this way, but at a certain point, it also is your fault, and you kind of have to deal with that.
Yeah, I remember probably it was one of our earlier pods, I want to say, I had brought that up where I was like, this is a wild report. Let me share this. Offensive coordinator getting his house egged. And I knew when you were like, oh, think about a fan base that maybe crosses the line. First thing that popped in my head, I'm like, is he talking about Philadelphia? Yep. We all have that thought process. I agree. I think he is hands down at least the most openly hated OC. I'm not going to say that my nomination for this award is beating your nomination, but once again, I, for whatever reason, was more in tune with the Arizona Cardinals, but they absolutely hated Drew Petzing, who is now the offensive coordinator for the Lions. And one of my favorite days in Twitter in recent, past couple months is when the Lions had hired Drew Petzing as their offensive coordinator. And the Cardinals fans were just seeing it on Twitter, telling the Lions fans, they're like, y'all messed up. They're losing their minds. They're like, you get the experience now. Thank God he's gone. And the Lions fans were like, is it really that bad? And they're like, yes, it's awful. It's awful. Get him out. So I'm excited to see the Lions fans potentially revolt because, like I've said, I've seen way too many Cardinals games, and Drew Petzing is not a good offensive coordinator. So we might have a similar story coming up next year with that. So I'm looking forward to that one. My next superlative is the Bro is Cooked award. This is in referencing to he is not cooking, he is cooked. He is very close to being done at this point. He is lacking the ability that he does. And you know what? You could put several nominations up for this. You can have this would be the biggest list on here today. I just wanted to throw a couple names out there just in different categories, and some of these are very obvious, and I'm going to give a final nomination to maybe a guy that not statistically shows that he's cooked, but just visually you can tell he needs to get off the field. Quarterbacks, I'm mentioning Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Russell Wilson. These are obvious. Running backs, longtime players as we have continued to watch the game, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, those guys on the last legs of the career. Wide receiver-wise, who the hell knows with Tyreek Hill at this point with his injury and how that's going to affect him. I think he'll make a comeback. I just don't know how effective it'll be. Deebo Samuel is definitely cooked. He's done. My nomination is not in any of these positions. It's at the tight end position. And this is Travis Kelce. You know, if you're looking at the statistics the past 3 years, they've all been similar. He's reaching 800 yards. He's somewhere in between 3 to 6 touchdowns. It's just, I have never seen a player, and maybe I'm thinking, the only player I can think of is Jason Witten at the end of his career, is that when you're watching a guy on the field and he just looks like he is the slowest guy on the field at a skilled position, I would rather give one of the offensive tackles the ball than Travis Kelce. But what I don't understand is Travis Kelce is still somehow always open. He's just an expert at finding the open gap in the defense, catching the ball and getting tackled 2 yards after the catch for a maximum yak. I don't understand how open that he gets. Dude is just a zone shredder. You actually put man on him, he's not catching a ball. But this is me just saying, ability-wise, we're watching it, and I think you can agree, what it was 3 years ago versus now, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't know how Noah Gray hasn't taken this man's job. I really don't know how, because he's Mr. Consistency. He's been in the league for a long time as a University of Cincinnati alum. I'm not saying I don't want to see him play, but it's almost like it's old Yeller at this point where I'm like, man, just step away from the game, just because he's getting to that point where I feel like he's playing so slow that I'm like, your chances are going to only get higher if you get in some type of injury. I don't want you to end up like Zach Ertz, where we just saw Zach Ertz probably play for the last time in his career last season, where he had that horrific injury near the end of the season. So I have no ill will towards Travis Kelce, more towards his fiance at this point, because I'm just getting tired of seeing her up in the booth with these games. But there's been hints of it where Travis Kelce, I think, is heavily considering retirement. I just think, hey, man, you've had a wonderful career. You know, you're definitely at the end of it. We can all see of it. And you're not going to a Super Bowl next year. You missed the window if you're trying to ride off into the sunset. It's not there anymore. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on Travis Kelce? You still think he's got a little bit in the tank, or are you seeing what I'm seeing, where I'm watching the slowest tight end in the NFL play?
I think he is the slowest tight end in the NFL. He definitely looks cooked out there. The Chiefs are kind of turning into a glue factory. I think it would be interesting, personally. You know how, like, NBA players, like, did you know that Hakeem Olajuwon played for the Raptors at the end of his career? Okay. I think it would be interesting if we saw Travis Kelce on, like, the
you're going to send him to Arizona?
No, because Trey McBride is there. What if he went to, like, the Jaguars?
Cleveland?
Oh, that would be. Actually, that would make a lot of sense. But, like, dude, you can't do that. Don't play one more year. The only reason he would actually play for the Browns is just to say he played for the Browns because he liked them growing up. To me, that's complete dead end. It's going to be another lost year. You can't have their quarterback situation.
Send him to the Jets. Screw it.
Oh, that would be even worse.
Have your career die there.
Like, is there going to be a frat kid walking around in a Travis Kelce Browns jersey in 2032? Maybe. We'll see. But, yeah, I mean, he's cooked. I think he should retire. He kind of missed his window to retire this offseason. Not saying he can't do it, but I still think he wants to play one more year. I don't even know if winning is the goal for him at this point. I'm sure he wants to win. Like, obviously, I'm not taking that off the table. But I think I don't really know what else he has to play for anymore.
I think that's the key point. Yeah, I'm like, what are you trying to achieve? I could pull up the tight end list, and maybe there's I just don't see him as a record chaser. You know what I mean? Are you trying to beat somebody on the list? I don't know. I might be wrong on that. Maybe he's trying to outdo Tony Gonzalez. Who knows? That's also tough. Can you imagine being one of the greatest tight ends of your generation and you still may not be the best tight end on your franchise?
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine? Jeez, Pete.
No,
he's got 3 rings, though. He's definitely better than Tony.
I'm sure, he's happy with that. He's like, yeah, I'll take the rings.
Yes. So my last superlative here is the worst owner in the league. And this kind of I don't really feel too strongly about this. I should have done more research, and I will caveat this conversation by saying that we've railed against certain owners on previous podcasts before. The easy thing for me to do would have been to get up here and destroy Pegula, who owns the Buffalo Bills. But in fairness to him, besides the stadium stuff and the weird stuff with Sean McDermott, which I think was shitty, is he worse than Woody Johnson? Is he worse than Jimmy Haslam? I don't think so. And so this really comes down to 2 guys, in my opinion, Jimmy Haslam and Woody Johnson. Both are bad owners. We were talking before the pod, and I think the obvious answer to this question is Woody Johnson. However, Woody did not have, at least in the media sphere, a really explosive past year like they did when Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback of the Jets the prior year. That was a complete meltdown year, and he was in the news, and it was the election, and he was previously the ambassador to the UK under Trump. And so there was all of this stuff swirling around, and it was Aaron Rodgers and him butting heads, and there was Robert Saleh and Zach et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like the Jets and Woody were just playing bad this year. It wasn't even like they were so bad that nobody even blinked. They weren't bad enough to even meme on. Like, people are memeing on the Jets, but they were just so horrible. We weren't even thinking about how bad the franchise was run. I would submit that Jimmy Haslam was the worst owner in the league this year, continually embarrassing Browns fans. The head coaching hiring process, where he enabled Andrew Berry to give guys tests and, competency tests or whatever. Like, I get they had Freddie Kitchens at one point in time, but my God, you're enabling this guy to do that. There's still Deshaun Watson on the roster. You have the stadium drama. Jimmy Haslam does not... he gets talked about as being one of the worst owners in sports, but I genuinely believe that he may be the single worst owner in the NFL now that Dan Snyder is gone from Washington. Woody's giving him a run for his money. Maybe they'll oscillate like the Cavs and the Warriors when they were battling it out for the championship every year. One year it's Woody, and then the next year it's Jimmy. And they're both bad in their own horrible ways. But I'm going to give the edge this year to Jimmy Haslam because the Browns had a great defense, and yet their offense was embarrassing. Their quarterback they traded for has the Achilles of a 6-year-old now, and they drafted 2 quarterbacks in last year's draft who were like, why? Shedeur Sanders was one of them. Why did he pick either one of them? Who knows? It didn't really make a lot of sense. He enables Andrew Berry to do all of these like weird tests, and they ended up getting Todd Monken because I think he put his finger on the scale during the hiring process. And all of these things combined to make Jimmy Haslam a bad sports owner. And I hope he gets his stadium up and he's really happy with it. Not because I want great things for him as an owner. I just want the Browns fans to finally have something to cheer about because it seems like it's only getting worse.
Yeah, you could nominate any one of these. I think I agree with the synopsis of, hey, you can clown on the Jets, but the Jets are just bad. The Browns are a circus. The fact that if you include Watson, coming into the year, preseason, they would technically have 5 quarterbacks on the roster. That's insane.
I forgot about Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, everybody forgets about Kenny Pickett. So it's like, so in this season, you have these 5 quarterbacks. I'm going to take it down to 4 because Watson, yeah, he's out. So you decide, we're going to get rid of Pickett. Okay? So you get rid of him. You're rocking with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco just, at least with Cleveland, doesn't appear to have some magic left. So that's when they go to the rookie quarterback carousel between these two. And then how wild is it? So this is a really, when do you see this? Mike Tomlin calling this out is 100% right. But why the hell are you trading a quarterback to a division rival? You're supposed to let this team burn to the ground. They better be giving you a haul for a player if you're doing within division trading. And they're just like, here, take Joe Flacco. I'm like, what? Like, don't be wrong. I don't think Joe Flacco's worth like second or third round pick, but they're just like, have him. I'm like, what? It just, that blew my mind. And so they're Stefanski halfway through the season, he's checked out, and then you're trying to play this fake ass quarterback development carousel with these two guys, and everybody with more than 3 brain cells knows that the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns is not on the roster. The one that's going to be, another savior. He's not there. He's currently not there. And you're wasting all of this defensive talent that you have. I already mentioned that defensive rookie of the year is a Cleveland Brown. So it's not like the organization is completely incompetent, but they're about 99% incompetent, and that's definitely more than enough to destroy a franchise. And it's just, some of the other pieces that they made, they're like, all right, let's, I like the rookie running backs they had. It's too bad that Quinshon Judkins' knee exploded at the end of the season. So it's like, oh, okay, the one really bright promise for our offensive future is gone. And then they go out and I'm trying to think of the wide receiver who's got Butterfingers that went to Alabama, was a longtime Denver Bronco wide receiver.
Jerry Jeudy.
Jerry Jeudy, thank you. My ability to recall names while in front of a camera is awful, but I could do it off camera easy. But Jerry Jeudy is one of the most overpaid, overhyped wide receivers in our generation at this point. He had some flashes there, but at this point I'm like, he's cooked. He's like, he'll be off of that team within a year or two just because of money savings at that point will be more optimal. This is just an incompetent franchise, and we'll see with Monken. Do I expect great things? Nope, but we'll see. My last superlative is a quick one. This is a fun one. Is what is the funnest or funniest sideline interaction of the entire year? For me, it is when Jackson Dart for the New York Giants got hurt, and they have Russell Wilson, their backup quarterback, their veteran quarterback, on the field. And both Brian Daboll and running back Cam Scatterbo break NFL protocol and get into the medical tent. And Brian Daboll, the head coach at the time, is yelling at the medical staff to get Dart out of the tent to get him back in the game because he is terrified of Russell Wilson playing football for the New York Giants. And he knows that every single second that Russell Wilson is on the field, there's a higher chance that he gets fired that week. And both of them, I believe, received at least $50,000, if not $100,000 fines for breaking this rule. It was just comical at the time. It was just like, it's all right, you got 2 grown-ass men running into this blue medical tent, which is just a tent with a table on it. Just be like, are you okay, Jackson? Please be okay. For the love of God, please. And Scatterbo's just sitting there eating red Crayola crayons because he likes that color. And he's like, you're good, quarterback. Are you ready? Please come back. So that was entertaining for me. Now, there wasn't, at least for this season, I don't think there was like one standout moment that was like, here's Odell Beckham hitting the kicking net and then it hits him in the face, like, or some wild crap. Like, there's definitely some negative ones where I got to think like, oh yeah, there's DK Metcalf punching a fan. I'm like, that's definitely up there. I wouldn't say that's the funniest, but I'm like, that's definitely the wildest. That's winner of Crash Out of the year. I didn't make that category, but there you go. I didn't, there's so many moments, and that's the thing. The NFL is a week by week thing, so we often get lost throughout the season of what event happened in week 2 versus week 8, and then you kind of doing like we are now, this sit back where it's like, let's review, and you're like, oh shit, yeah, this did happen. Oh yeah, these stats. Oh yeah. So I was wondering, just to cap it off for us, what was the funniest thing you saw on the NFL field or sideline this year?
Do you remember, and I can't recall what week it was, and I think they actually lost this game. But first year Jets head coach Aaron Glenn, they did something in the game, and he had that weird dance. I know you remember this clip. He's like, and they ended up losing the game. I have to remember what game that is. I don't know. But, that was the only memorable moment of the Jets' entire season is Aaron Glenn doing that sideline dance during a game they lost. So that's the first one that comes to mind for me.
I'm watching it right now. See, he's running down the sideline. It was about 4 months ago, so it was pretty early. Oh, yeah, he's doing that, the high knees with it. Dude.
Come on, Aaron.
That is another head coach that will be gone by the end of the year next season. Which I don't have anything against Aaron Glenn. I thought it was cool when the Jets hired somebody within the organization, very well respected player. Did a lot of things with that defense up in Detroit, but I just think the Jets are they're many years away. They're in a true rebuild again. But yeah, that was my funniest moment, was the medical tent. The Glenn dance is pretty good. DK Metcalf punch, and I'm sure we're missing plenty more. I could think of all the ridiculous things like players dropping balls before they reach the end zone. I know that one hurts as a Colts fan. And
we actually traded him to the Jets after that.
Yeah. So I will say I'm very happy and thankful this year that I didn't have to deal with any Will Levis memes. That was awesome. I was not having fun getting a meme every week from Will Levis that hurt me. Everybody else loved it. Some of those were really good. But my favorite, just to go off to, I'll say this, my favorite Will Levis meme, I don't know if it's the Spider-Man one, the celebration, or if it's the one where he throws the pick and he's on his knees and his hands are on his head and he's watching the guy run by him, and I'm like, bro, get up. There's just so many. You have a whole collection for one season from one guy, and I'm like, man, this guy is maybe not verbally, but imagery-wise is on the level of Jameis Winston. And that's terrifying as your franchise quarterback. So I'm very, very happy that I hopefully will never see that again in my lifetime in the two-tone blue jersey.
My favorite just overall thing from this year was getting to watch Phillip Rivers play football after
that whole thing was a meme, but
yeah,
I loved it.
It was fun, and I actually got to go see him in person, which was fun. And yes, my team collapsed, and it was not that fun of a season for me. But at the end of the year, we'll summarize this year by, giving it a good tip of the cap. It wasn't the best football season ever, but there was definitely some good moments, and we were here for it. I can't remember what week we started the pod, but man, we've been talking NFL gosh, was it week 10? I can't even remember, but we've been really going in.
It was around Thanksgiving, give or take a week or two.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is technically this will be the last episode of the 25-26 season. Not that we're not going to talk about football content, but we're going to see a shift in our content because I don't think everybody wants to listen. We will also run out of ideas at some point if we just did football-only podcast all the way up until August. We will get in just some dire situations with football content. So we might have, not that we won't go away from it, but I'm I think we're both excited to see what topics are going to come to mind and how we can go across different areas, whether that's more geopolitics, history, which I think would be a really fun one. Obviously, we still have some sports going on. I always say that when football is over, that's when my attention shifts to basketball, and that's a little bit more focused with college because, hey, we're not too far really from Selection Sunday and March Madness coming up. So yeah, well, I'm excited to see what we talk about going forward, and we'll have some great ideas regardless of what we do.
Absolutely. I think we will too. I'm looking forward to diversifying the content a little bit. I know we did that around the turn of the new year with the 3 predictions, but we're chugging along, and this 2026 NFL season was fun. It was good to see Sam Darnold get the W. Both of our teams weren't very good. So, that's what it is. And, actually, maybe we'll preview this. I don't know when we're going to be able to do it, but I think we've talked about this before. So I lost in our fantasy league, and I'm not going to go on a tangent. We're wrapping up here, but I lost in our fantasy league, and I have to eat hot wings, like really, really, really hot.
The Hot Ones Challenge.
Yes. And I think we're probably going to end up making some content out of it. And we shall see when that's going to happen, because I'm not sure at the moment. But I'm looking forward to it. I actually think it will be fun. Now, I am probably just going to be in a lot of pain. But I would much rather do the Hot Ones Challenge than a lot of other things. So if all I have to do is, sit on a toilet for 24 straight hours after this, I'd take that as a semi-win.
You just got to be able to do it before the next fantasy draft, so late August. So there's your window. You have time to prep, call off work, cry, do whatever you need to do.
There's no crying in baseball or fantasy.
Well, I don't think anybody said that while eating the hottest wings on earth, so that'll be fun.
Is shedding a tear crying?
How many tears can you shed before it becomes crying? Is there a number?
If it's just like a single tear, or your eye wells up, but it's not like crying to me invokes like sadness,
sobbing,
yeah.
I don't know. We'll find out once you do it and we see how many tears you have. Then we can make.
I think I'm just gonna tank it like a Chad. Honestly,
I don't, dude.
I
you're gonna be. That. I don't have anything red next to me. You're gonna be as red as this right here.
I have the stomach of a
Victorian child.
No. I mean, like any culture that eats hot foods like that, I appreciate. Obviously, it's gonna tear me up regardless. I'm gonna have to do some prep, but I'm not like scared of it. Actually, the worst part about it, I think, is my lips getting chapped. That's going to be my lips are going to be buzzing. But honestly, I'm more worried about that than my stomach, but we'll see.
That's fair. Well, hey, thank you everybody for listening to episode, I believe, 11. Thanks for joining us on our football journey throughout this season, and we're very excited to bring you some more content going forward. So leave a like, share our video if you wouldn't mind, just to get the word out there. But we appreciate your listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
See y'all later.